Hey everyone, Nathan Nerdarch here from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, and today I'm talking about the overview for my campaign setting, Vyrium, and it's modern, fantasy, futuristic, pretty much whatever you want it to be. It can be. It's just kind of like up or down. How crazy is it?
It's the campaign setting for all times.
Yes, it can be the worst of times. It can be the best of times.
How does it even work?
All right. Well, I'll let you know. But first, let me introduce.
I'm Ted.
I'm Dave.
All right. So I started off this kind of inspired by these like growing crystal things that had properties and that you could, do things with. So it's kind of like the magical equivalent of, batteries.
So you're not growing these in your backyard?
No.
Okay.
But, that's what I kind of said. Oh, like, this would be it. And it's like, there's got to be a reason somebody did this. So there's this guy, Vir, who's going to be like the major lawful god in the realm. And I made it more of like a chaos and lawful rather than good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like those are the big forces in the world, and then everybody can decide whatever they want to do about it, rather than like have like solars and devils be the main like forces in the like outside the physical realm.
So instead it's Modrons and Jesters?
Sure. So for the god of chaos that was like forming everything. So there's like chaos everywhere, and then there's intellect that develops out of that chaos, and the will of that intellect is Vir. So Vir eventually starts making things out of the chaos to have a place to sit, have a place to stand, kind of like organizing it.
Mm.
And his dad didn't really like that and tries to break it down. So it's kind of like the fight, chaos and law and like order.
Father and son.
Yeah.
There you go.
So chaos is the main thing. Then there's stuff that develops out of it, kind of similar along the same veins of how things work in a lot of campaigns. I think with the order, chaos, or like lawful and good, evil and good, or lawful and chaotic, and kind of like that. One develops the other, and then they have a fight. It's kind of like creation stories for everything. And it's also, you can think about it like organization of universe, where you get planets out of stardust, that kind of stuff. So anyway, those are the two major deities, and most people that are actual physical beings don't like the chaos god, or Saren is what I'm calling him right now. I don't know if I'm going to keep that name. I forget if it means something. I'll have to look back at my notes. But so Saren and Vir, and all the kind of things that Vir tries to organize, he makes races. He made humans first. And
the humans came first.
The humans came first. And then Saren said, hey, this is great. Like, I have new material to work with. And humans were very susceptible to chaos's influence.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, how can I twist this and play with that and
yeah.
change these? And
you go play in the dirt.
And it wasn't like
go live in the trees.
It wasn't like, bam, I'm going to make trolls, and bam, I'm going to make orcs. The only things that exist currently are, well, as long as you can make a story for it, you can have whatever you want in it. But there's things that are more legendary. Like, there is the first troll, which was just simply a human that could regenerate at a monstrous level. So when the other humans who were followers of Vir tried to fight this agent of chaos, pieces of them fell off, and other trolls were made from that. So there's a legendary, like the first one, and the reason there's a whole race of trolls is because you can chop him in half and he makes two. Right. That's the reason that there's a ton of them. Now you
said legendary troll, and I just picture this guy, in his basement on his computer, going away.
And then I said, your mom. And he totally freaked out. Yeah, so
just like that.
And any creature that had a way of reproduction that was not standard, like the troll, there's a lot of them. So there might be an aberration, like an aboleth. There might only be one aboleth. That's it. There's not a race aboleth. There's just the one, because it was way back in the day turned from a human to this thing, this monstrosity, and it's an immortal monstrosity maybe, or it's really long lived. Eventually, stuff starts to settle down, and you have races like orcs and half orcs and the different kind of PC races. But there's not dwarves in the normal sense. They're actually rock people, and they reproduce in a different manner. They're just like basically they consume minerals, they consume different objects like gems and things like that.
Are they asexual? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and then they just kind of
split off.
Yeah, well, they're not asexual completely. There can be like a mixing of things. So, but it's not like hey, I'm just a human that's shorter and grumpier and more bearded, and I do the same things a human does. So there's a lot of different variations to how things reproduce, and there's no dragons. There's a symbiotic race that I named Draglands for right now, but basically it's a symbiotic organ that basically not infests, but basically it lives inside the host body.
I'm picturing a face hugger right now.
It's kind of like a face hugger, but it can fit inside your body.
Yeah.
So it's like a thinner, smaller, nicer face hugger.
It's a parasite with a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, so
that's essentially what a parasite is.
Yes, but yes, it's got a nice symbiosis because it makes you a half dragon of whatever. Okay. So
a parasite just takes, whereas
this creature eventually realized that it could. It found the most powerful creature that it's seen in existence on this planet, which happened to be a giant, monstrous winged lizard. And it decided that it's going to hang out there most of the time. But you can easily have the Dragland decide to host in an orc or host in a Dragonborn, or like anything that you want it to have in it. So it's kind of like that's how the half dragon template works, rather than it being something that it's not the dragon polymorphed and then made it with a human or something. It's these things just decided to inhabit something else. And they tend to, there's like this, they tend to reproduce in the thing. So if it's a black dragon, what's a black dragon in regular D&D is this acidic loving environment parasite that tends to hang out in sulfurous ponds and things when it's in its natural state. So that's where it would return to reproduce, kind of thing. So that's just kind of like a mechanism for how things are different. So there's a lot of that going on in the realm. There's also a lot of different tribes of elves, because Vir finally figured out that trees were not really manipulated by chaos well. So the race of elves is actually based off of different types of trees.
Okay.
So there's different types of, there's like one elf that's kind of like a normal elf from regular D&D, but the rest of them are like, an elf that was made from an oak tree is going to be different than an elf made from a cypress or something. So it's like there's different sub-races of elf, I guess would be in the DMD 5th edition terminology.
So these guys aren't vegetarians, they're vegetables.
Well, they're not just simply, they're not just simply transformed trees in the sense of like they're made out of wood, but they have a lot of characteristics. It's basically like Vir took a tree and said, well, I like my human template, but it's too screw-upable. So it can be effed with too easy by agents of chaos. So I'm going to pick something.
I picture trees all over your world with these humanoid-shaped cutouts of people.
Yeah, he just went bam with a cookie cutter.
Pretty much.
So they have their own. They each have their own subculture and how they interact with each other, as well as how they interact with.
So they look. Do they look tree-like? Like if they came from like evergreens, instead of hair, is it more like pine needles that are like kind of layered?
They're more dryad-esque. That kind of.
So they're not like Groot, where
they're not Groot
bark.
No,
but they've got a more of a humanoid. Shape and appearance with hair, but their skin might be like bark, or is even that
well,
or more like the coloration is
they could have coloration. I mean, there's some trees that have a very smooth skin to them. It's not. Yeah. I mean, there's some trees that are also really rough.
Right.
So those can be symbolic and more societal structure. Like perhaps something that has rough bark tends to be more gruff, like unelvish in a way, like more dwarf like in their kind of how they deal with people and what they think about it, rather than physical characteristic of the tree didn't take over as a physical characteristic of the elf.
Okay.
So they're elf with, maybe a little hair difference, maybe some
like if they're made from birch, maybe like a silvery white skin.
Yeah. Or their eye color might be a particular shade.
A lot of this is all, very, very fantasy-esque. But in the beginning, you're talking about being fantasy, modern, futuristic. So let's pull back on the fantasy angle.
How do our elves use rocket launchers? That's what we need to know.
Right?
How has this like you made this setting a long time ago, or designed this setting a long time ago? How has it moved through the ages? What are the kind of changes you see in modern? How does it move to futuristic?
Okay. Well, there is a major organization that you could say worships Vir.
Mm-hmm.
And in the fantasy modern, it's in the fantasy era, it is more like clerics to a god.
Mm-hmm.
In the modern setting, you could say it's more like an organization to an objective.
Okay.
And in the futuristic, it takes on a kind of strange, like twisted
combination of the two.
Yes, because there's some people that are really like, no, Vir really exists.
Yeah.
And he's granted us all this goodness kind of thing. We have coffee dispensers because of Vir kind of thing, rather than this
So cleric meets bureaucrat?
In a way, and you can fluctuate in between that big range. Yeah. But in modern, it's similar to how there's really...
It's an organization with a goal. They're trying to do stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily, maybe it's inspired by the religion, but it's not really religious per se.
And then something terrible happens and people get religious.
Yeah. So then it's they take like the best traits of both spirituality combined with this organization.
Yeah. And then they become, galactic in that sense of, they become spacefaring and they go out and
I'm just picturing the Beastie Boys singing Intergalactic in my head now.
Intergalactic planetary.
So that's the major change to that. There are still creatures, but it's kind of like they become more like
space creatures.
They become more of a protected kind of class, rather because they say, well, we don't have to obliterate all the chaos creatures. So it becomes this kind of they try and live along.
They put them on a reservation.
In a way, yes.
Oh my god.
But not for the reasons that we tend to put people on reservations, but because they want to say, well, it's like a
booze and gambling halls.
Like a wolf reserve. You want to still have this dangerous creature to exist. You want to let it exist, but you don't want it to encroach on your building a city. So you get to build these cities within these walls and not have to deal with all the insanity that's going on outside. So they basically build larger and larger structures of order in which to build civilization. And that's where they get the big like boost. That's kind of like the fantasy to modern era is this conquering of the world and this building up of civilization. Which is like the ultimate epitome of order with its good and its bad parts.
So since we have this as set up as a campaign setting that you can play in any of these time slots with the fantasy, you can do all of your basic fantasy machinations.
I want to play a futuristic modern game, and I think Nate should run it in his campaign setting.
Excellent.
So as I was saying, you can play your standard plots that you would normally come up with for a fantasy game in this setting. If you were to do modern, like. Is there any differences that would need to be changed based on the setting?
Magic is treated more like in fantasy. Magic is like, well, some people have it, and it's not like a birthright or anything. There are sorcerers, but there are wizards as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then wizardry is just kind of like formulaically taken to an extreme as progress occurs through the fantasy to modern to futuristic. So there's no science in the sense of when you explain something in the game, it's magic or it's psionics. In fact, Vir is kind of like
more psionic than
the primordial psionicist, affecting the world through your will directly. So it's more like illicit technology in the futuristic campaign rather than any type of, science-based stuff. So it's all psychic circuitry and things like that.
Yeah, not really. Like magic eventually would replace science, and then once that happens, it actually becomes the same thing, right? Because really, like the principles of science would actually eventually be applied on a wide scale to magic if it existed long enough and become widespread enough. So is basically what would happen.
So anything that would be created scientifically in our world would actually function via magic. So you have the regular principles of like the way the physical world works, but all advancement seems to be that kind of, well, we've researched these things can be done with magic, so it's just easier to do certain things with magic. Yeah, they've got things like, hey, this grain grinder runs off of gears because it's just silly to make it a magic item. But so you pull out your phone or your tablet, and as opposed to having all these high-tech wires and that kind of stuff, it's probably got psionic or magic crystals as part of its components.
Yeah, there would be power packs, would not be batteries made with chemicals. They would be like a crystal that's powered with something. It might be powered with electricity, but the device that's holding it is more of a construct of magic and psionical components. It might not even be high end.
Well, yeah, because that's the technology they understood.
Yes,
that's the science they understood. They would you're not going to create a new science if you have one that already does it.
Right.
It just goes against. It kind of goes against like the natural principle of things. Where, like,
I'm just getting to the point where trying to explain the fact that in our world, there's some people that say magic exists. Other people say, well, they're a bunch of crackpots. But science took off, steam power didn't. So in the setting,
well, it took off to the amount it could.
Well, yeah.
I would love to make a steam powered mech, but it's really not feasible.
But for the campaign setting Vyrium, magic became widely accepted, and therefore magic is the science, and therefore magic and psionics.
Yeah, magic, psionics.
Yeah, it just becomes more practical to expand upon what you already know than go off and create something whole cloth.
Right? Yeah, it's a high magic, high psionic. Even in fantasy, it just wasn't the safety and the networking that's required to advance it. Okay. So people are like studying off in towers so that they can safely destroy anything that comes to their tower from the top. But once you create that city structure and that safe habitat for the nerds to gather, they start talking to each other and expanding upon the subject rather than. So that's the shift from fantasy to the modern age, is that kind of that buffer that hurdle that, hey, I don't even get to talk to people. Really.
Know what your world needs, especially the future and the modern? These secret dark cabals of technologists who don't even use magic, the filthy heathens.
And is there a cost to using magic and psionics besides just simple energy? There could be other things that underlying are happening in the world. So you can take it either way. I'm not going to cry if someone makes psionics actually require orphan hearts or something. Or maybe that's a little extreme. But there could be a dark aspect to one of them, and you could actually make it where you're like the resistance trying to overthrow this terrible order.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be true. Some people could just believe that there's a finite well, and that after years of people using this constantly, it's being depleted. And there's things going on now that's like, with the last 30 years of research, we've declared that all of this stuff is now making all of this,
I don't know if this is relevant or not, but there's a game called Cthulhu Tech, and one of the principles behind that game is that the society finds an outer gate and they begin using it as a power source.
That
that can't be good.
Oh yeah, I watched a review video on it, and it seems fantastic. Like, there's mechs, there's Cthulhu monsters, and there's like these other things going on too, and I'm like, this is amazing.
So it sounds like you really want to be in a modern or future game.
Maybe
I think it'd be fun.
Good,
something different. Switch it up.
Yeah, I can totally run with something like that. It's just going to have to be. I'll have to get you all the intel.
Well, I've been waiting to play Vyrium for 10 or 15 years. So
all right. Well, I guess I got at least one.
Yeah. They spell enough the the hype on this.
Yeah,
one.
I this is a long hype
Yeah.
for my group.
So I think that's good for a primer anyway.
What do you guys think of the teaser? Did you like it? Did you
Ask Nate questions in the comments below. While you're at it, like, share, subscribe. You know the drill, guys.
You can come hang out with us on Facebook.
You can also join the conversation over on Reddit.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.